could you please introduce yourself and then tell us about yourself? You are what are you working as, and also where you're from, and perhaps a little bit of the background. How do you would like people to know you as? But yeah, thanks a lot and welcome, Danial.
Okay, thank you. Nice to be here, Gary. Okay, so to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Danial Ismail. I'm an interior and spatial designer based in Malaysia and Turkey. I also teach interior architecture at the Center of Studies for Interior Architecture in Selangor. I mainly it's for it depends on the level of study. If I get students from postgraduate, then I'm happy to teach postgraduate as well. Um, as a background, a short background about myself, I work more towards the philosophical side of design. If you want to know more about my works or what I've been writing, please go to my website, and also you can contact me personally as well. The most recent topic I'm writing about is the theory on hyper-interiority, and that has something to do also with the urban scale. So it's quite interesting as well.
Perhaps you can share us. Maybe there will be some definition of resiliency in architecture from both sides, which is one from urban level. We are talking about performance of a city, and then how resilient and how efficient of a city can actually be sustainable in terms of environmental side. And also another side where a lot of time we don't talk about is actually the emotional side, where if is it resilient enough a city for providing happiness for the people? So could you please share with us what's your definition of resiliency in this case?
Okay. Okay, I think in my opinion, I think to really understand how a city can be resilient is to understand its occupants. Okay, so being designers, I think we should really go back to the fundamental of our profession, which is designing for people. I mean, we tend to try so hard right now to design for the planet, and I think it's quite important for us to consider that by designing in a better way for the human leads to a better planet. Leads to a better environment. So in order for us to design for humans or for people, we first need to understand the human itself. I would say the overwhelming effects of interior space, or the overwhelming effects of architectural space, when there is too much, and when there is an unbearable side effect of the space on the inhabitant itself. People tend to react in ways, be it conscious or subconscious, be it tangible or non-tangible. So these reactions can often be interpreted into physical, and also into very bigger forms of expression. Take for example Gordon Meta Clark. We talked about this before with Gary on the project, the Conical Intersect, where he opened a few holes in the wall of a building to kind of interact with the outside, with the street level, with the urban environment. And that was a kind of expression or show of that, how the human actually really wants to escape from these architectural spaces. People kind of have a idea that domestic space is a space where you want to escape to, not escape from. But even from like the 70s, starting from the 50s and 70s, and until now, with the invent of modernism and modern buildings, I think there is the appearance of the sick building syndrome, and all this kind of mental or psychological illnesses caused by architectural spaces. So there was a move to understand how to escape, and the feeling of how to escape from these spaces became more and more appearing. So again, talking about how to connect from the interior to the exterior, um, with the same narrative of the conical intersect by Gordon Meta Clark. If we see Le Corbusier's Villa Savoy, the invention of the metal framework of a building allows for the curtain window to appear, and you get the sense of visual connection. He was talking a lot about urban planning, and about the concept of bringing the separating the roads with the streets and with the building. But in another sense, with the projects that I mentioned earlier, he tries to take them away from the urban setting and putting them into the building. If you see in Unité d'Habitation, he's trying to put like a public space on the rooftop. He's trying to incorporate a more semi-private facade of the building, and there are countless amount of liminal spaces in the building. So in a way, it's making the building more interactive or more incorporated with the urban setting. And this is where when if you see from his projects that he's trying to kind of bring the outside to the interior. So we can see that, again, I mentioned the conical intersect is a emotion, to show emotion, kind of a retaliation. And then the Villa Savoy is a visual connection. And then the Unité d'Habitation is actually incorporating the outside to the interior. So now you have kind of the stages or evolutions of how an architect or how an artist um, tries to reconnect with the environment.
I think that's a key point, because perhaps you might wanted to mention about, okay, we don't want to build the building, any future development shouldn't be more than 5 stories, or perhaps we should plant more trees along the street. And I mean, emotionally, what do you think Malaysians in KL need the most to encourage this kind of sense of ownership and belongings, even when they come to the urban space?
Okay, so that's actually quite a really good question. Okay, I think this is a question where there is a group of researchers from another university here in Malaysia, and they are really working on mapping out the pedestrian walkways of Kuala Lumpur, especially in the touristic areas, to make these Kuala Lumpur more walkable, and I really appreciate the work that they do. And how, looking back at Kuala Lumpur, I think, let's say 10 to 15 years ago, it's quite different than what we have now. I think there are a lot of improvements which are going on, and the spaces which are created are more interesting in a way. Where we are going towards a good direction, I must say. I think the thing that is lacking is, I think, the sense of security. If you feel, I mean, I wouldn't feel safe to walk alone in Kuala Lumpur. I think during the night time, I would feel that it's not safe. I would rather be indoors. But if you want to have a city which has public spaces which people can connect to and be part of, or feel belong to, it needs to be a space where the transition in between the living quarters or the domestic spaces to those public spaces needs to feel accessible. So I think if to go further in Kuala Lumpur, I think what we can do is think about the filter in between the interior space and also the city, the urban setting. So if we can work towards providing more shade, it can be, it can be architectural, it can be natural, anything that can shade or provide microclimates. And these are, I think, keywords where we can, I think, provide more time for people to connect and be attached to these public spaces.
I mean, for me, at some point I feel like Pondok is like a good example where even though it's not enclosed with four walls, but that kind of enclosure with just horizontal planes, it makes me feel like I'm indoor. But I'm quite curious, is there any examples that make you feel alike of the sense?
I think you pointed out a good point, and I mentioned this few days before uh, to one of my colleagues. Like, defining space in a tropical climate is actually just having shade. If you have a shade which shelters you from the sun, or if you have a shade which covers you from the rain, you already feel like you are in a space. You don't need anything else. And for me, this is exactly what defines the interior and exterior. If I have a shade or a roof on top of me, I don't need any walls or anything. It already makes me feel as if I am in an interior space, and it makes me feel um, having a sense of refuge. You can be in a environment, in a micro environment where you are protected from a certain element. You are filtered. I can say like these microclimate conditions are filters. We are not like isolated, but we are kind of filtered from certain elements, or certain parts of the what makes us think of the exterior conditions. So being in a refuge point makes you feel safe, makes you feel like you have the choice in, either to stay or either you can go. So these are actually basic needs for a human to actually survive. If you think about it, in a survival situation, the first thing they would always tell you to do is build a shelter.
A lot of time we tend to see like resilience in architecture tend to be very ecological, sustainable, or very performance derived kind of city that we want. But at the same time, we've forgotten about the comfort level and personal emotional level of the occupants. So thanks a lot, Daniel. But before we go, I thought to ask you the last questions, if you have anything to say or anything to add on to the conversation we had.
Okay, I think it's quite uh, it's worthwhile to consider vernacular architecture, and how we can learn and from this. I mean, saying it like that is kind of so generic, but really think about it. Like, how can we learn from vernacular architecture? I mean, the people were building using local materials. They were building using local how can I say, local, not local, like inherited skill sets, from people which they learned before from the masters and etc. And this building like this enables you to kind of be resilient in a built environment. And if for the example that we were talking about is the kampong, people are able to move house just by carrying the house around. Literally you can carry the house around because it's built in a certain way, it's built with certain materials, it's built with the understanding of the local culture. So having that kind of connection with the building or with the space like that is incredible. I know even personally, and even people I know close to me, they have a personal attachment with their traditional homes. You know, they have a personal attachment in the sense that they can tell you what type of wood that house is built from. They can tell you who built it, those parts of the house. You know, the process of where to choose where the main door faces. You know, so there is this kind of wisdom that we kind of we forget. You know, being graduates from architecture school or design schools, which you know is mainly referencing Bauhaus or referencing modernism, makes us forget our local wisdom, you know. And I think it's worthwhile for us to rethink about that and explore, you know, this to be more resilient locally.